Alright y'all, welcome back to the channel. Hope y'all are ready for your usual set of Shinra propaganda, and let's dive into it. What we're going to be looking at today is going to be the one timeline theory. I'm going to kind of be breaking down my original one timeline theory and how after the new trailer with Zack and Cloud on Zack's shoulders, how exactly that could be a possible intro to the Final Fantasy VII story in Rebirth, and also how there's a possibility that Zack is going to be replacing Tifa and helping Cloud break out of his psychosis from the Mako poisoning experiments at the Shinra mansion. Hope you enjoy it. Let's jump into it right now. Where I think it's important that we start is my personal perspective or my theory on where exactly we are currently in the Final Fantasy VII compilation. Where do we sit? Where is it going? What's the future of Final Fantasy VII? And what direction are we actually going in to make it kind of super duper ooper clear? So I think that this is the first thing I want to say is that what benefits Final Fantasy VII as a game is that the whole theory behind it, Cloud, Zack, Sephiroth, Angel, Genesis, Hojo, Genova, is that it's a very complex and confusing story. And I think Nomura actually benefits a lot from this confusion because he always can add or remove information and kind of just use the timeline as a scapegoat. So what I think that makes way more sense, or at least the direction I think that they're going to be going, is not to kind of throw us in this metaverse, different timelines and all of that. And like, that's a possibility for sure. And for anybody that does support that theory, for sure, I'd say go check out their channels, because they're likely to give you exactly what you're looking for. But for people who are here and are still here through some of the other videos of Sephiroth turning good and how there's going to be a redemption arc and how this is more of kind of like an open discussion of where the game is going based on the information that they provided. And yeah, this could be 1000% wrong, but the one timeline theory remains impenetrable. So all jokes aside, this could be 100% wrong, but this is currently what I believe is the most likely scenario and how the scenario is going to develop with the members of the party that we currently have and with those going to be joining us in the next iteration of the game, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So first thing to start off after all of that talking is, what does Zack provide to the story? What does Cloud provide to the story of Final Fantasy VII? So we know after Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core was released that Nomura made a significant change in adding context to the ups and downs of being a member of Soldier. So not just the training part, we get to see the social interactions with one another. We get to see kind of a breakaway. So Genesis is one of the first to break away and take second and third class soldiers with him when he kind of left to Utai. And I try to look at the game more of like Final Fantasy VII is a real world somewhere else. So it follows roughly, I know they could jump 100 feet in the air and land and not get hurt, and it comes at a cost. So the cost of being able to have these superpowers and being a legendary hero is your life will be shortened because you will die from cellular degradation. And that's the main storyline that we're getting in Final Fantasy VII Reunion moving forward, or Crisis Core Reunion. And I think it's pretty clear that that's the reason why Nomura told us to play. He's like, oh, you must play Final Fantasy VII Reunion before moving into the new games. And in 2022, they released Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core Reunion, which is essentially an upskilled version of Crisis Core. I wish they would have kind of changed some of the dialogue because it is kind of cheesy. It doesn't kind of flow. It's beautiful in its own way, is what I'll say to define it. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder, right? So it's beautiful kind of in its own way. What I appreciate from Crisis Core, and what I take away from it, is that it shows us that there was a story before Cloud, and there likely is going to be a story after Cloud. So we get briefly introduced to Zack Fair in Final Fantasy VII after we find out that Cloud's stories aren't really making sense anymore. We go to Calm, we find out that we have some flashbacks, get some information about his past. Tifa's kind of hesitant to say, oh, I don't actually think that's how it happened. And then in some other scenarios where Cloud is kind of breaking down, grabbing his head because he's being influenced by Jenova, there's parts where he inputs himself into where he thinks he is, but he's not actually there. Segue back into what the hell I actually want to talk about, but I hope you enjoyed that little side rant so you could kind of get a little peace of mind of where my whole head was at with all that, because I try to actually think these things through. I don't just try to just throw out material just for you guys to watch, and I think that maybe you appreciate it more when there's a little bit more thought and ideas rather than just, here's the latest news of, and then I just read a friggin' news article. And I might start reading news articles, but just saying, man, this is kind of the way I like to do it. And if you enjoy it, like, comment, subscribe, click the freaking like button. Tell me how much you think I'm stupid in the comment section. Back to the two things I really want to talk about, and maybe three. The first thing I kind of want to talk about, and I'm glad that I kind of gave a little bit of my thoughts on Crisis Core, is how the one timeline theory essentially works. So we know that we're in Crisis Core Reunion, Zack Fair's timeline. We know that Zack in his original timeline dies, okay? Quote unquote dies, okay? The reason why I say quote unquote is because this is where my one timeline theory starts, okay? My one timeline theory starts from the point after the Nibelheim incident, and Zack and Cloud are captured by Hojo and experimented on with Jenova cells. We know they've been injected with Jenova cells and Mako, okay? We know this. We know this. But because Zack was previously a member of Soldier, he was already previously infused, so the effects that he had from Hojo weren't as severe as the effects that Cloud has. That's why he's able to break out. That's why Angeal shows himself to Zack and says, you say you're a hero? Break out of this. What the hell are you talking about? Again, Angeal's the GOAT. And in that main story, that main one timeline theory in Crisis Core, we see the conflict that Angeal has. We see the conflict that Genesis has. We see the conflict that Lazard has. We see the conflict that Sephiroth has. We see Sephiroth have a heart. Think about Zack. Think about the relationship he has with Aerith and say, hey, if you want to go back, now's the time because we're going on a mission. He tells Zack straight up into his face. He says, yo, we work for Shinra now, but on this mission, if I find out the truth, I'm not rocking with Shinra like that anymore. You know what I mean? So this shows some kind of intellectuality. And I've been trying to push this idea through, but it's like people are so hesitant to hear. People just think that Sephiroth is just this mind zombie evil guy. And I'm like, no, guys, like, look how young he is when he's fighting with Glenn in Ever Crisis. If you were born and bred for war and every aspects of war, Hojo and Professor Gast, Hojo would have made sure that Sephiroth knew every single fighting, the best at every single fighting capability. He'd be learned, meaning that he would know the regions, know the resources, be able to plan to use those resources against the people. Like, he would know all these things. And if you say, oh, why are you assuming that? It's like, dude, did you not play Crisis Core? In Crisis Core, we're told that, hey, have you seen Sephiroth? And I think it's Kunsel actually who says, yeah, he's been in the Shinra freaking laboratory studying in the archives, just reading every single book for the last couple freaking days. This shows us that Sephiroth is a thinker. He cares about what he's doing. He does care about his legacy. He wants to be a hero, or thinks that he's in line with what Shinra believes is a hero. Okay, even though he might be the one that's rejecting it the most, of like because even Genesis, like I say he's rejecting it because Genesis throughout the entirety of Crisis Core, you could clearly see that he's jealous of Sephiroth and that he wants to be the hero. One of the first scenes we see with Hollander, Genesis, and Zack and Sephiroth is a discussion where Genesis is recounting Loveless to Sephiroth. And what's important in this scene is that we get a clear understanding of what Genesis' motives are. We know Genesis is degrading after he suffered the injury in the battle system. We know that Sephiroth cannot donate any of his cells to help Genesis. Even Sephiroth, when Genesis is like, yo, I need your help, and gives him the apple, Sephiroth like slaps it out of his hand. He's like, I'm not helping you, bro. Like, what? But I don't think it's I'm not helping you because you're evil. I think it's a little bit like Angeal, where Sephiroth is like, if I'm a monster, why would I help create an even stronger monster in Genesis? So from that point on, you see them both kind of break apart, where Sephiroth gets hugely influenced by Jenova. She kind of like activates and just starts manipulating him like crazy. And also the same thing happens to Cloud, right? So for me, I never understood properly how come Zack isn't affected by the control of Jenova, and Angeal's not affected by the control of Jenova, and Genesis is not affected by the control of Jenova. So there has to be something that is not explained, or that maybe I've overlooked, that clearly explains why Sephiroth is affected under the control of Jenova, because he grabs his head. That's like the ultimate giveaway. You grab your head, and it's like you almost get an instant hit of psychosis. So the Nibelheim incident, right? So we have Tifa, Zack, Cloud, and Sephiroth, and Zangan. I'm Zangan. I'm the trainer. Or he's in it. He's not in it. He's sometimes in it. Like, this is what I mean. Like, they need to clarify the story. Did Sephiroth jump into the live stream, which is in Before Crisis, and which is in that other kind of short film? Or is it he got sword chucked into the live stream? I don't know if that even makes a major difference, because I don't think that stab would have been lethal. I mean, the Buster Sword is massive, so it would go pretty much like this thick across someone's body. So, I get it. It would kill most people, not Sephiroth. That's what I'm essentially trying to say. Okay? And then from that accident, when Cloud and Zack are injured, they go to Hojo, they get infused, all that stuff. And Sephiroth is now in the live stream, alive or dead, full body or not, whatever you decide, with Jenova's head. Okay? We know this. Because at Shinra, even in the first FF7 original, when they show it, when Cloud looks into the tank, we see Jenova headless. Okay? In FF7 Remake, when the Sephiroth clone is carrying the Jenova body, we see Jenova headless, right? So what does this tell us? This tells us that the reunion could be the reunion of reuniting Jenova together, the head and the body, and then that being the big bad, because I do not believe Sephiroth is the big bad of the story. And if you want to kind of side argue that, well, the big bad's actually Hojo, it's like, sure. But if nobody's manipulating Sephiroth, then Hojo's not out there doing bad things, just doing scientific things. Which, this is not a morality discussion or ethics discussion, okay? Because I actually do believe in science and testing. So essentially, after that scene, when Zack breaks out from the influence of Angeal out of the Shinra Manor, and they escape, and he goes and fights Genesis, and we see Cisne, and we see the horse, dog, flying animal that Angeal incarnated to protect Aerith, and delivers Zack his final letter, which says, "It's been many years since you've been gone. I've been trying to reach out to you," is what Aerith says, and then she pretty much says, "This is my last letter." And I think it's 5 years. And Zack goes, 5 years? Last letter? And he's like snapping because it's like he's in love with her, right? So his goal right now, you have to think, is that when he was in Nibelheim, the last contact he had with Aerith was he got a phone call from her and he's like, I'll be right there. And like, I promise, right? Zack's whole thing is he's a hero and he's trying to make his master proud. You can see this because when he kills Angeal, when he then presents in front of the new soldier first class or second class soldiers, he tells them, lets them know what sacrifice it'll take and to stay true to their honor as soldier. You know what I mean? And he died saying those exact same words because he understood Angeal's sacrifice and that to be honorable, you have to be a man of your word and you have to keep your word. You said you would protect Cloud, so protect him. And unfortunately, in the original Final Fantasy VII, this is where Zack does not succeed. But what I'm going to argue is we can't trust Cloud, okay? We cannot trust Cloud because, one, he's Mako poisoned out of his friggin' mind, okay? So this is where the one timeline theory starts. Everything from Zack's story and Loveless in Genesis and Sephiroth and all of that Ever Crisis leading up to Cloud being left alone at the rocks is the real storyline, okay? Everything after that is up in the air because we can all agree that up until that point, there are no possibilities of a time jump because the time jump we see in Remake happens at the end of Midgar after we fight Sephiroth, after we defeat the Singularity and we walk through the portal. And Zack only dies after that White Flash rock scene where Cloud lifts his hand up. So to me, from the point where Cloud lifts his hand up, nothing can be true. Yes, we played original Final Fantasy VII and we saw where Cloud lifted his hand and we saw where Zack got shot and we saw a story of Final Fantasy VII original. Now, what I argue is none of that happened. I know what you're saying. What the hell? How can your thoughts be none of that happened? That's so stupid. It's not all just a dream. And I'm just like, why not? Have you not played freaking Kingdom Hearts 1, 2, 1.5, 2.3, Birth by Sleep, in a dream of 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 a dream? Have you not played that? I mean, if you haven't, just know Nomura is always trying to flex his mastermind and the fact that nobody can figure him out. Where does that put us? That puts us at a point where we have Cloud story only after Zack drops him down. So what I argue, and what most people freaking hate that I even mention, is like, that's so stupid. They get so mad. I don't understand. But I mean, I know that most people get upset and they're just like, that's not the story. I read the Ultimania. I'm just like, none of that matters. None of that matters anymore because you read the Ultimania for FF7 OG. We cannot use, my theory, we cannot use the information that they gave us in the Ultimania of FF7 OG to know the truth about the story if Zack's alive. It doesn't follow logical sense. If we played FF7 OG, we know Zack dies. In the OG, we know Zack dies in FF7 Crisis Core, but then lives in a remake. Then any of the previous reveals that didn't have the outcome of Zack is alive can't be used to then further that any rational sense. I'm just trying to go with, let's follow what they're giving us. And if we had an answer and we closed the book on FF7 OG, we had the Ultimania, perfect. Everything worked until they added more. And they added more when Crisis Core dropped in. They added more when Remake got dropped in. They're adding more now that Rebirth is going to be dropped in. Okay? Now, how can I support my point, right? Okay, now that I'm on the channel, let's say I agree with you, man. Like, okay, you make a valid point. Good. I'm glad you're starting to, the light bulbs are starting to pop on. The next logical question has to be, okay, I'm listening to what you're saying, stranger on the internet, but how do I know that what you're saying is what the results of Mako poisoning would do to an individual? And I'd say that's simple, like overly simple. One, we know the effects of Mako poisoning because, and I'm not even gonna use, I could like see here, okay, here's a perfect example, okay? But I will not do this. Here's a perfect example. I could use the Ultimania to prove that Cloud, when you enter Mako poisoning, you go into a deep psychosis because there's too much knowledge that overflows your brain because it would have all the knowledge of the entire Earth's creation from day one, right? And that's why you just go crazy when you fall into the live stream. Or when you get Mako poisoning. How I know the severity of the effects of Mako poisoning is they tell us. Not in the old Ultimania, which applied to Final Fantasy VII Original, but when we go visit Jessie's dad, right? We go visit Jessie and we find out that he had an experiment or an experience where he hurt himself at a reactor and was unconscious essentially for 1 day until somebody found him. And since that 1 day that he's been in a reactor, not in the live stream, not experimented on, just the general Mako exposure from being at the reactor in a friggin' hazmat suit, he is a vegetable. He's still in his psychosis right now. If we know in Final Fantasy Remake, we see a character who's been affected by Mako poisoning, we see the timeline of their recovery, which is indefinite is what it seems like. How can we then assume that Cloud just snapped out of it? I don't believe that. And as kind of like a creator, a storyteller, someone who appreciates a good story, it's not good storytelling. And it's not to nitpick, oh, you should have done this and you should have done that. But it just has to be consistent with the information that you've provided, not with how I interpret, just the information you provided doesn't make sense. You showed us that if you get affected by Mako poisoning for 1 day, it could pretty much destroy you into a vegetable the rest of your life, right? So how do we know Cloud isn't in a hospital somewhere right now? Oh, because FF7 original. No, man. No, that's not why. That's not why. So my whole view of when Cloud lifted his hand up when Zack walks away, anything from that point on is free up into interpretation. Especially since Remake, okay? So my interpretation is using what they provided us in the upcoming trailers. Use the words they're telling us. Do we know everything about Sephiroth? Is the future guaranteed? All of these are things they're saying in the trailers, and that Aerith is talking to us, Sephiroth is talking to us. Sephiroth telling us the effects of Jenova. Jenova can transform into those we hate, those we love. So Genova's mimic ability, which was never released to us in open dialogue until the Ultimania, right? But now they're actually telling us. But we think he's talking to us at the time that we see him in the trailer. But how do we know he's not, it's just not a re-edited, where you just clip the audio out and then let the video play and then add the audio into a different section. I use those kind of editing tips when I'm editing.
Sephiroth.
They say she's a monster, that she can peer inside you, into the very depths of your soul, that she can become those you hate, those you fear, those you love.
In my theory, after Cloud lifts up his hand and you see the white flash, this is showing us that we can't trust Cloud's memory, because oftentimes throughout the game, anytime there's a white flash, we know that Jenova's attacking Cloud's mind. So when I say that FF7 original is happening in Cloud's mind, it's not just happening in like he's asleep and it's just like, my view of where Cloud is after the white flash is that he's in a simulation of the exact world that he actually does live in. Cloud is in the Matrix, the entire Final Fantasy VII original game, and he only takes the red pill when he defeats Sephiroth. And we can see how it's super difficult to Cloud. Even in the simulation, he needs Tifa's help to find the appropriate answers throughout the original Final Fantasy VII when we're in Cloud's subconscious. And for me, what I think they're gonna do is they're gonna reveal that in a different way. But that's the last thing I want to talk about today. After Cloud is able to defeat Sephiroth, my whole view is that that'll be the catalyst to wake him up. Even if you want to say, like, this is how far I'm willing to take it. Even if you want to say all the way until the end of Advent Children, when he's actually free, comes his guilt after he saves Denzel. That's what frees him from his guilt. After he goes to the forest, leaves with Marlene, that's what clears him of his guilt, because he's able to vocalize to us, I never gave up on you guys, on the children. I never gave up on you guys. Even though I knew I gave up on myself, I was willing to die to find the serum or to find a resolution to geostigma. That's how we know Cloud resolved his guilt. And it's from that point, he never loses a battle. That's why I tell you guys, we're looking at things in the wrong time. Think about all the fights Cloud has up until that point, right? Deeper levels. And for me, once Cloud gets that final victory, they'll find a way to do it sooner because they have to bring Sephiroth good. Okay, so just know that. So they're gonna bring that scene of his resolution sooner so that we can have more of a team up to go defeat Genova, which I think is the big bad, to go defeat Hojo, who's gonna be like, what, Sephiroth? After everything I've done for you, I'm actually your father. I've done this, I've done that. How can you betray me? And then we'll have to then start knocking off the people from Deep Ground. Nero, Weiss. Like, we never actually fought them in the game for like a resolution. Just beating them in the freaking VR doesn't mean anything. Unless we're saying that this is the way Final Fantasy VII is gonna honor Dirge. But I think like, no way, because Nero's here. That's the thing too, is like, if they're giving us the answer, don't go away from it. Go towards it. My whole view is that anytime we see the Beagle, this is in Cloud's mind. This is not the real timeline. This is not, it's not reality. It's not reality. Anytime we see the Beagle, it's the Matrix. It's in this fake world where you still eat, poop, drink, meet girls, have fun, get old, die. That still happens in this Matrix world. But my view is, once he's better, or once he defeats whatever he needs to accomplish in that internal fight, which is actually such a good message, that it would say that no matter how psychologically difficult things can get, there is still a way out. I think there's power in Cloud's Matrix kind of journey. It's not just like stupid, like, oh, you didn't think about it, oh, just making it, oh, just a dream. No, it's not just like that. It's to show what self-overcoming is. Because he didn't give up. He was trying to get back to Zack in real world, right? He was trying to live through Zack's honor the rest of his life until he had to face the fact that, oh my gosh, wait a second, am I who I think I am? And I think a lot of us would be better off if we took that time to internalize, do some meditation, do some physical activity, commit to a task, commit to a run, and overcome it. That's why I think this is important. So you guys, it's not just like a theory, like a light paperweight. Well, I guess a paperweight's heavy, but it's not just like a feather in the wind. Like, oh, maybe this and maybe that. And I didn't really think. It's like, no, I try to genuinely think about it and then find counters to what I'm saying and then try to answer those counters. And if I could come to an area where I have a solid foundation, why would I let anybody throw me off just because they disagree with my take on it? It doesn't make any sense. That's my whole theory. For the one timeline theory is that eventually Cloud will do something that will help him snap out of his psychosis, and then we'll enter kind of the rebirth where Zack is, and we'll be able to kind of accomplish what the next steps would be. And in Zack's timeline, the next steps would be defeat Genesis, get influenced by Angel on what the right thing is to do, find Aerith and have your final words with her, because I think her fate's inevitable. Like, maybe. I'll get into that in my Angie video, but I think her whole, she has to die. But I think that this way, in like with Zack being alive, it'll be like way more destroying. So I think that's how they're trying to make the story, to make it to have an even bigger impact than it did previously. Or at least I'm hopeful that they'll do it this way.